have to be someone who is either a risk taker or someone that is averse to risk. I can't. Those two traits cannot exist mutually at the same time. The alternative is to ask people is for you to try to create human beings in such a way where they can embody both traits that are opposite of each other, but change at different points in time during the day or seasonally, which doesn't make up sense, because people's makeup cannot change. People's makeup is not supposed to be changing from time to time. If not, we'll not be able to trust anything. We won't even have the word called character. We won't have the word called temperaments. We won't have any kind of unit of describing people, because people don't have any fixed behavioral traits. So this is the reason why certain traits that are opposites of each other, that exclude each other, cannot coexist in one person. So if we are going to have those characters in a society, we have to have different people carry these traits. So in a society, we need people that are willing to take risks, so that when it's time to take risks, they can be taking it. And we need people who are also risk averse, so that when it's time not to take risks, those people can hold them back, right? And so we have a whole lot of bunch of traits like that: aggression and non-aggression, being disagreeable and being agreeable, right? Being adventurous and not being adventurous, being all kinds of things, right? So because some of these traits exclude each other and people want to have them individually, so that is the framework upon which we begin to see that certain traits tend to cluster in one sex or one gender, and certain kinds of traits cluster in another gender, right? So if God in his wisdom created human beings fundamentally as the two sexes, male and female, right? He created us as male and female sexes, right? Since many of these traits exclude each other, and they usually exclude each other in a binary form, we actually see that many of these traits are opposite in a very binary form. It's aggression, non-aggression, adventurous, non-adventurous, risk taker, risk averse, neurotic, not neurotic, that kind of thing. So what happens is that certain kind of traits are clustered in one sex, and certain kinds of traits are clustered in another sex. Again, let me say for the last time, these traits cannot coexist in the same person, because they exclude each other, so to speak. So, and what begins to happen naturally from that is that, okay, one of the sexes will be risk takers, they will be adventurous, they will be more willing to be aggressive, because if you're going to be a risk taker, if you're someone that is willing to take risk, you're also someone that is more likely to be aggressive. There's no way you can be a risk taker, and when there's time for conflict, you are less likely to enter the conflict. People who are willing to enter conflicts are people who are also risk takers. So you see them being more aggressive. That's those group of people will be more aggressive. Those people will be more adventurous. Those will be risk takers. They'll be less neurotic. They'll be more stable. That kind of thing. Then you see the other people, the other sex and gender. These people will be more agreeable, because they are less likely to want to take risks. They are less adventurous. They temper down the hot head of this bunch of people. So when you look at that, by the time you want to begin to name these two divisions of people, that's why you begin to call them male and female. That's why you begin to call them male and female, right? So what I'm saying is that there's certain traits that cluster with males, and there's certain traits that cluster with females. Don't forget that. So there's a continuum to it, right? It's not an absolute thing. For example, you might find guys that are more agreeable, less more neurotic, less this and all that. But that's not the point. The point is that on the whole, what you'll find is that certain traits are clustered more to say a certain gender than the other. So that is where the definition of what it means to be masculine comes from, where it means to be a man comes from, and everything. Now, going to the specific example that you used, that does a man need to be tough? I don't think that word tough. That word, I think that word tough has too many things that it can mean. So I don't think tough is a masculine trait. If you mean being willing to be aggressive as a masculine trait, right? If that's the definition of tough that you mean, right? But if you mean the ability to be stable and unwielding and unchanging, it's actually more of the feminine traits. Yeah. It's actually more of a feminine trait. Even the biology of the females tends to even support that structure of those behavioral traits. Women are way steadier, they are way more balanced, they are way more, generally speaking now, they are way more, they are stable, they are tough, they can stay through the hard times. They're not labile, and they're not labile people generally compared to men, and all that. So if that's the kind of tough you mean, I will even say women tend to be tougher in that sense. But if you mean things like aggression, being willing to be aggressive, that's definitely, even our biology supports that kind of trait, so to speak. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. But do you think that there are traditionally certain rules that are peculiar to? I assume both of us are speaking in terms of, we understand that there are just two genders. I mean, except if you disagree with me on that. I'm assuming that you believe that, it's just
Absolutely.
male and female. So do
Oh,
you
the only
think
two sexes.
so
I'm so sure of that.
do you think that there are certain rules that are specific to them, or do you think that
Yeah, so
it's otherwise?
culturally, people came up with rules. Those rules generally evolved. People don't understand that it's only very recently that human beings had the um, autonomy and the freedom to be able to do and chase and worry about things that are not essentials. There was a time when there was no leeway, there was no there was no chance to be worrying about useless things, because everything was about survival. And at that point, it was important for people to have roles, to specialize in them, and to do them effectively. And that's why I agree with Jordan Peterson very much, that the vast majority of the relationship between men and women since humanity began has been more of cooperation than oppression. Because if it was all about oppression, humanity would not have succeeded and survived today. Humanity would not have succeeded. Humanity will not be here. The truth is that the relationship between men and women has been more of cooperation than it is, because people try to look at the past with 21st century lens, that they try to see that they begin to see things as oppression, which are not which are not so, so to speak. So let me not go into all that. Traditionally, people came up. So because of that, traditionally people came up. Rules naturally evolved. So even in primordial times, if as humanity, as Homo sapiens are developing, what they discover is that there's a bunch of us that are physically stronger, more aggressive, more willing to take risks, more willing to do that. Naturally, those guys start take on some roles in the society and in the family. And the ones that are less, that are more risk averse, the ones that are more stable, the ones that are more, tend to be more neurotic, so to speak, and all that, are the ones that temper things down, right? When you use the word neurotic, I'm using it in a psychological term, not in the negative term of people that, the word neurotic can be used in a negative term. What I mean, it is a psychological term of neuroticism, as in people who are who are more amenable to stress, people who are more likely to be affected by stress, and therefore need a more stable society and a more stable environment, so to speak, right? So anyway, so over time, because of that, these roles naturally evolved with these two genders, and that's why the world is the way it is, and you see it consistent all over the world, right? You see that thing consistent all over the world. Naturally, human beings grew into those roles because of necessity. But now that our challenges have been overcome and they have changed, and they're not challenges of physical survival anymore and more things, those traditional roles that we used to have are becoming less and less important. They are still really relevant for a vast majority of people, right? Because at the end of the day, it is still the minority of the jobs in the world today that are intellectual jobs. It struck me this week, and I was going to discuss, but I don't even know, I forgot. The majority of the jobs that people still do in this world are still jobs that will still end up being predicated on the traditional gender roles. For example, the vast majority of jobs are still jobs that are physically taxing, so to speak, right? The things that earn money are still the things that are physically taxing. The intellectual jobs, by proportion, right, are still the minority, right? We still have more people that need to work on construction sites, people that are bricklayers, people that are plumbers, people that are this and that. things that require more physical exertion. Even jobs that are so-called intellectual, which puts men and women on the same footing, even though they are intellectual, the physical rigors of doing the intellectual work itself tends to give will tend to give men the edge. Do you understand that? For example, men are more likely to cope with doing, as for medical doctors, they are more likely to do calls back to back. For example, Thomas Sowell was giving an example of where he read that women earn less than men. And then he was surprised and he went to study and did a study into medical doctors in America. And he actually found out that if you calculate it based on work done per hour, women actually earn more. And so the reason why men earned more was that men were willing to do more calls, they were willing to spend longer hours at work. The women were not willing to leave their children alone, but the men were more willing to do that. So men were doing like 1.5 times the number of work hours that the women were doing. And of course, at the end of the day, who will earn more? Because you are paid per hour. So that's what political propagandists just look at and say men are earning more than women. But when you broke it down, when you actually broke it down to the amount of hours done, the amount of work done per hour, it turned out that women were actually earning slightly more than men. You know, that kind of thing. So at the end of the day, right, that paradigm of men working more than women may still continue to persist until, as the world evolves and our work requires less and less physical exertion and more intellectual work, that's when we'll see more and more equality among the genders, right? So having said that, I believe that gender roles, as it is, should be a matter of necessity. I think it's one of the areas where utilitarianism can work. Gender roles should be based on practical needs, not empty traditions or ego or whatever our society has attached to being better or being inferior. I think it should be a matter of practicality, right? So we should always give people roles that they are best suited for and that they will be most useful for as things that will help our society as a whole. So if at any point in time we find out that women are better suited for, if in the family unit, for example, if a man and a woman come together and they agree to be partners for life, they're supposed to ask themselves things like who should stay at home with the kids and who should not stay at home with the kids. Those questions should be answered by what is best for the family, not what our society tells us is what our fathers used to do. Do you understand? So so in such a case, it is possible that the majority of people will still find themselves just because of the way, just like I explained earlier, people will still find that maybe many of the husbands are still the one going out to work, but that should not be absolute. If you find yourself in a family where the woman is actually more competent or she has a job or she has a skill where she can earn more money and the man's work does not earn that much and to pay him, if the family is supposed to work better for him to stay with the children, then he should do so, right? Even if you can say he's not naturally inclined to nurture children and all that, in the case of that family, what is best for that family is what everybody should agree on. And so Christian leadership would adjust such a man to make sure that he makes painful adjustments to make sure that what is best for his family is what is done. Right? So yeah, so that's my view on the whole gender roles things. It should be based on what is best for the society, what's best for the family, how it's practical, and not just tradition and useless cultures of primordial, all those primordial sentiments and all that. No, that's not what it should be about. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there are some, not to use terms that are too complex for people, but there are terms like complementarianism and egalitarianism and all that, in the sense that the two genders are here to complement one another in union of marriage, or in the other sense that they are in a sense equal both in role and in nature. So how do you look at that? Do you see, are you more aligned with the complementarian part of it or the other side?
I'm not even really studied that word itself, complementarism, and I'm not really sure because I'm very careful about this word nowadays because there's all kinds of baggages with words.
Yeah.
Everything. So you are saying a word and you think you know what the word means, but someone else means something else. So I once saw somewhere that someone was not okay with the way a certain minister used complementarism, and he was not okay with it. But I've not really had time to study it in details. And the person was complaining how that people were using complementarism as some kind of backdoor channel to insist that men were somehow superior to women and all that. So I don't know. I don't know the whole baggage and everything. What I just believe is this: men and women are equal, but they have they have in terms of the family structure, because I don't want the word to be used. I don't want my words to be used for cases that it doesn't apply to.